Welcome, Fredrik Kopsch, to Cash and Soul.
Thanks.
So in this podcast, we're exploring the kind of intersection between spirituality and business and economics. And you, of course, have a very interesting background because you are the chief economist of Timbro, which is about as right-wing as you get in Sweden.
Yeah.
Very free market kind of liberal variety of right-wing. What got our attention with you a little bit, is that you went out into the media and said basically that all churches should be just turned into something else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that. I was more specific towards one church in Stockholm, but the general idea was that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was one specific church called Clara Church in the middle of Stockholm, and then you actually was invited there, and after that you said no. So I guess the first interesting to hear what happened in that. When you visited that church, what happened inside you and what made you change your mind?
Yeah, if we backtrack a bit to the debate, I did a year ago. I did a public statement. It wasn't really thought through that much, so I did this public statement that I made an observation when I was on the south side of Stockholm. In some places on the south side of Stockholm, you can see the rest of the city. And one observation you can make then is that you mostly will see church towers as the tallest buildings in Stockholm. Now there are a few other buildings that are taller, but mostly you will see church towers, which I think it tells you something about Stockholm as a city going into modern times. If you compare with, say, New York, for example, if you view New York from afar, you will see high-rise buildings. You won't see churches. The churches are still there, the old churches from the 1800s, such like that. But in Stockholm, it's the other way around. And the reason for that is that we have restrictions on what you can build in central Stockholm. So that was what I aimed for then, a year ago, give or take, in May. I said something to something in I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said that isn't it strange that we still have all these old churches in Stockholm? We could tear them down and build housing instead. That was not met with in favor, put it mildly. And then I did it again this year. I said something that specifically aimed at this church called Clara, which is in the central part of Stockholm. I said that maybe we should have a nightclub there instead of it being a church. And then I said there aren't that many people there anyway, which was an incorrect statement. So I was invited there, as you said. I went there for the morning prayer, I think 8 o'clock in the morning. And they have, so it's the thing that I noticed when I went there, and that people also told me the days before I went, I think I made a statement on a Thursday and went there on the following Tuesday, is that the Clara Church is, but compared to other churches, a large part of the civil society in helping homeless people, for example. So they have their morning prayer, but there are also a lot of homeless people that come there for food after the morning prayer. And that was that became quite clear to me visiting the church in the morning. So I did what I don't think it's that dramatic. I changed my opinion, but I understand that not many people do, I guess.
It's nice that you were able to change the opinion, but it was more kind of utilitarian thing rather than that you felt something around the spirit of the place, or
no, I did that too, but then so I didn't change my opinion as much as what I did when I made the statement is I think I chose a poor example in that church. I still have the opinion that you should be able to convert churches into something else. In Sweden, that's not that's not possible to. It is possible, but it's not easy to change the use of a church. It's definitely very difficult to tear a church down and build something else. But what we've seen in the past, I don't know, forever during my lifetime, is that the membership to the Swedish church has decreased. That's one thing, but also active members are decreasing over time, which means that we have a lot of churches around the country. Central Stockholm is probably a poor example because they're well-visited churches, but around the country we have churches that aren't used that much or aren't used at all, and we. Aside from that, we have legislation that makes it difficult to change the use of churches. You can't just sell the church, or the Swedish church can't sell a church to someone else who can use it for whatever they want in an easy manner.
Okay, but and how about yourself? You, because I can in a way I can recognize the feeling of not really feeling connected to the kind of Christian church we have in Sweden, because I think the things I had is quite boring to go there and you sit and somebody's talking at the front and you know it's like it's when it comes to spiritual experiences, it's one of the most dead ones I've had myself. Right, you don't really have a connection to. Have you had any places where you had stronger spiritual experiences?
Well, I've had that, but I also had it in the church when I visited for the morning prayer. I share your experience with other churches, so I rarely go to church. As you say, I'm not a member of the Swedish church since 20 years. I'm not. I would consider myself an atheist, so I don't believe in any higher powers. The times I go to church lately, so the past 10 years, have been, well, I guess, a funeral, weddings, and my daughter sang in the church choir in the church next to where I live in Lund. But that's the times I've gone to church, and it's not. I mean, you're there for other reasons than just going there for morning prayer. I've never done that in any other church than Clara. But when I went to Clara, I felt. I'm not sure how to express it, but I think the best way to express it is a sort of feeling of gratitude towards, I don't really know towards what, but it was, I think the duration was an hour of the morning prayer. And I think it was just, I mean, it's not that often you get an hour where you can just sit and contemplate things in your life. So I think that had a great value to me when I went, and I've had that feeling a few other times as well. When I think the closest, or twice, it's happened twice in the past 2 years. So 2 years ago, my mother's husband passed away. We hadn't had that much contact in the past 5 years or so. I've had sort of a shaky relationship with my mom since I turned 20, so for the past 20 years. And I've felt, specifically when I was younger, sort of an anger towards both him and my mom. But when he passed away was 2 years ago in July. We had this expectation that my mom would pass away when he passed. So I woke up at, I think, 6 in the morning. It was in July during summer. We were in Skärhamn, where I grew up, so a small fishing village on the west coast, where he is from. So my mother's husband. And I woke up. I had, I think, 5 missed calls from my sister. So I immediately thought that my mom has passed away. So I called her up, and she said that Klaus, that was his name, he's about to die. He had, I'm not sure exactly what killed him, but he was moments away from passing. Kind of unexpected as well. So then I went for a walk early in the morning, before the town wakes up. It's the best part of the day, I think, in any place where people live. I walked to with my dog. I walked to the house where I grew up with him, and then down to the ocean, which is so the ocean holds a specific place in my heart. And growing up in a small fishing village. Yeah, exactly. I went to one place close to the ocean by the harbor, and then I thought about him, and I had the same feeling that I had in Clara Church. I think a feeling of gratitude and no anger whatsoever that I've felt in the past.
And that was at the moment of his death.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a spiritual experience in one way. But you consider yourself an atheist. So how do you mix that together, having these experiences but still being an atheist?
No, I think it's mostly based on. I'm not sure what that feeling is and where it comes from, but I had the same when my mom passed away. She passed away a year later, so about a year ago. I had the same feeling then. I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's like the anger that I've felt before is gone, and it's just replaced by gratitude. I'm not sure where it comes from. I don't believe it comes from a higher power, but it's an interesting mechanism, at least inside of me, that I've reflected about now and then since.
Yeah, it's interesting. My spiritual journey started actually with my mom dying, and I also had a really problematic relationship with my mom, and so I think it's and it was actually at her deathbed, and I suddenly got this connection with her, and that portal into her soul in a way, and after that I started crying and hadn't cried for 25 years, and then I cried for 2 weeks, and that was the start of my kind of going from a very disconnected person to a more connected person. So I think it's interesting. And how was your relationship with your mom? I mean, you said it was difficult. What happened?
Yeah, it was quite difficult. So I had a great relationship with her when I grew up. She had a troubled life. I think changing men quite often, not choosing the best men, and then she started drinking when I was about 18. She started drinking. I didn't really, I thought about it. The first time I remember I talked about it with someone else was with my sister. I have a few, but she's my only sibling that I share both parents with. We talked about it in 2003 during summer. I think she called me and said, do you think that mom has a drinking problem? So then I was 21, I think. So that's 21 years ago. So that's the first time I talked about it. So it must have started a few years before that. And then I think we had a relationship on and off, where I quit talking to her for some periods of time. And then, sometimes she sort of got back to that old mom that I was used to. So different personalities. Typically when people drink, they're not a nice person when they drink, but when they're sober, which she was doing periods of time, she was like she was before she started drinking when I grew up. But that became more rare over time. I lived close to her for a few years. So this was in 2003 when I first talked about it. Then I lived in Luleå studying, and then I moved around for a few years. But in 2008, I had a kid in 2008. In 2009, we moved to Stockholm, and she lived in Stockholm at the time as well. And we lived quite close. So in the beginning of that, I went there because I wanted my kids to, I also got a second kid 2 years later in 2010. I wanted my children to have a relationship with her. But it turned out, in the beginning I went there now and then on weekends, just, unannounced, walking there. And it was 50-50 that she was sober. So after a while, I kind of got tired of that, and sporadically the contact got less and less.
Absolutely. So it didn't really affect your childhood as such. It's more something that happened later, I guess.
No, I think the drinking didn't affect my childhood, but there were other problems that she had. I think she had a troubled life from the get-go, really.
And how much of that did you inherit, did you feel? Or did you inherit or were you able to?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I have inherited from that. That's one thing I'm trying to figure out, right? But not sure what I inherited from that. I don't think I'm not very similar to my mom. I don't think. But it's always something you think about. If it's becoming an alcoholic is partly genetic, right? So that's one thing that I sometimes think about. It's not. I'm not worried that I will anytime soon become an alcoholic, but it can happen to anyone, I guess.
I'm interested actually with the just you being an atheist also. How do you? Because I guess in my life I had a couple of, when I developed the most kind of in personal manner or spiritual, it was during times of crisis, right? When and how has it been in your life? And with being an atheist and everything, with crises happening, did you have any major crises then? And what happened in those? And what did you turn to when you didn't have any spiritual?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I've turned to. I've had a few major crises during my life. The connection with my mom was one of them. That's been, it's been troubling me. I think more than I thought as well. Before I can't remember. So she passed away 1 year ago. That's in 2023. I talked to her I had a 2-year gap in talking to her from, that must have been, it was in the start of the pandemic, I think, 2019. She went to hospital because of her drinking. And the doctor said that if she drinks again, then she won't survive. And during that summer, this was maybe in April 2019, I went to the hospital. She was here in Stockholm in Danderyd. I went from Lund with my sister, talked to the doctor, and then over the summer that year she was sober. So I went to visit her then again. And in September, I think my sister called and said that mom had called her and that she had started drinking again. And then 5 minutes later, she called me as well. I didn't pick up the phone, but so that was the last time I had a chance to talk to her, when she was, because then she was herself in a sense, but drinking. But as the doctor said, she would not survive drinking again. So during that period, I think over a few weeks, her liver didn't function enough to handle the alcohol. So she got alcohol poisoning. And from then she wasn't, it was difficult to communicate with her. It's like communicating with a person who has Alzheimer's.
Okay, wow.
So over that, I think it was 2 years I didn't talk to her. But after 2 years, and
then she died.
Her. Yeah, she died. But I started having contact with her 6 months before. Moved her down to one of my other sisters. Moved her down to Skåne, where we both live. So I visited her every week. Which I feel afterwards was pretty nice, but not really sure why. It's not that I got any closure. It wasn't that easy to communicate with her.
And what's your relationship with death? Being an atheist, and how do you think around death?
No, I think that we're here for a while and then we're not. That's basically my thought on it. I don't think anything happens after. It's like what happened before. No idea.
Are you scared of dying, or what's your relationship?
I don't reflect much about it. I haven't been close to dying, so I think don't.
But when your mother died, and when you're, what did you think around it, or feel around it?
It made me very sad. I was in South Korea at a hotel room in Seoul when she passed away. So I cried like you for I think 2 weeks.
Oh wow!
Not constantly, but it just came over me now and then. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never really thought about if anything happens afterwards, or I don't believe that she's in another place. I believe that she's not here anymore.
For me, it's I basically used to believe the same as you, basically, and have a very mechanistic, because that's the way we were brought up, right, in Sweden, to believe that, we have our brains and our bodies are like a machine, and once the machine is gone, then we are gone, right? And in one way, and it is the kind of view we had for the last 200 years, right? The kind of modern view or mechanistic view, and to me, and I think gradually changed my way. I think actually some psychedelic experiences were actually the ones that really where I had like a direct experience of God.
With psychedelic drugs.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And where, but not only with that, but those were the first times that I got a breakthrough, and I think after that I've come to feel that one of the big reasons, that we're having problems in the society right now is that people are they only believe that they're here for a short period of time, and let's grab as much as we can while we're here, because it doesn't matter, who cares what happened, I'm gone anyway in 50 years or 60 years or 10 years or
maybe.
So how do you think around that? I mean, do you think it's the kind of mechanistic worldview? I mean,
maybe, but I still think that even though I don't believe that I will be here until, let's say, 2082. I turn 100, so let's say I become 100 years old. Not unlikely. People get older and older. But I still think that I can have an altruistic view of not only that I want to leave a better world for my children and their children, but also for other people that I've never met and never will meet. So I don't think, I'm sure that there are people who are more selfishly driven and want to grab as much as they can. But I still think that these virtues of being generous to others, for example, it doesn't require you to believe in a higher power. You can have those virtues anyway.
And when you get connection with this kind of like gratitude or like something bigger than yourself, in one way, I mean, it's a connection, right, to some kind of spiritual dimension.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you feel fulfilled of something. It's a very strong feeling. That's one thing that I struggle with is feelings. I'm very good at trying to think about how I feel about things intellectually. Very bad at actually feeling things in my body. So I have a therapist. We typically only talk about that. I describe a situation and he says, how does that feel? And then my answer is typically something describing how it feels in an intellectual manner. And his question is always, how does it feel in your body? Which I find very difficult to put words on, how things feel in my body. But these few moments that I've had of that feeling of gratitude, I think I can, that's such a strong feeling that I can, it's easier to put words on it, that you get this warmth in your body and you feel just completely relaxed and at peace. Which is also, I think, an intellectual description of it, not how it feels physically.
Not how it feels
exactly.
physically. But I think you have a really good therapist, because I think that was one of the keys for me, at least, was to kind of realize that feelings were actually located somewhere in your body, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I used to have this feeling here in my kind of pit of my stomach.
Yeah, it's anxiety in my therapist. It's anxiety. I typically have that feeling as well.
Yeah, because it was like I did everything I could to avoid it, right? I was, working like the dog, and used alcohol or nicotine or whatever to get just run away from that feeling, right? So and how long have you started doing this and with your therapist?
I've done it for a few months now. I did. That must have been a year and a half ago. I'm quite good at doing spontaneous things. So if something comes up, I quite easily jump on things. And a year and a half ago, I noticed, I think it was on Facebook or some other social media, the psychologist program at Lund University, they have a 1-year course for their students who want to become therapists, where you can apply to be a patient. So you get a student that you talk to for once a week for a year.
Okay.
So I applied for that, which was, so I had this guy, I think it was 4th year psychology student. We met for a year, and I started by, so I wanted to talk about my relationship to my mom, and I started our first meeting with that, saying that she will probably pass away sometime during our talks. It was 2 semesters, so a year from September to May, and she passed away. I think I had my last meeting with him on a Tuesday. She passed away on the Friday before that.
Okay, wow.
Which I thought was
that was kind of a little bit of a like fate, or
exactly. I think it was. I expressed it to the therapy student as a bit comical that I started our first meeting with that, and that it happened just before our last meeting. But so I started with that, and I think I had. It was about, I think, the same things. I'm still not sure exactly what it is I'm exploring with myself, because it's very difficult to put words on it. And you have these, like if you meet your therapist once a week, you have new experience all the time. And to me, it's difficult to find a structure, which I suppose it is. I mean, if you're exploring your own emotions, it's quite difficult to, at least in the beginning, to put a structure on everything. So I'm still not convinced, but I think it's easier now with my new therapist, who is a trained therapist and not a student. Easier to try to aim for that structure, but I feel it's a lot of work to get there.
Where do you want to get?
Well, I want to understand my emotions better, and I think I want to be able to stay in those emotions longer. So now I've come to realize, like with the story with Klaus, my mother's husband, that was place specific. So I was in Skärhamn by the ocean, remembering things that we did together when I was a kid. That makes it easier for me to hold on to a feeling of, something that's happened, that feeling of gratitude. So I've noticed that with other places that I go, that have they bring back certain memories. For example, I lived on Götgatan when I was a kid until 1989. I think we moved away from Götgatan. When I go there, I also get that sort of that feeling when I'm around that building, actually, where I lived.
Well, the gratitude feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, and this like warm feeling of childhood memories, I guess it is.
And how does it change your life then when you started getting contact with your emotions? I mean,
well, I'm not sure it has changed my life that much yet. I'm not really sure how I wanted to change my life either. But I'm not sure. I mean, some things like coping with emotions in a better way, I guess. It's something I want to be able to.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I said, it was 12 years ago when my mother died, and that's when I wasn't feeling my emotions at all. I was more like a machine, you know, just always in my head, always like doing stuff, very functional, but also always had this kind of, you know, thing. And what happened with me after a while was that the world became much richer in a way, much more like more like seeing colors instead of just black and white. And I was able to before that I often had the feeling that I was, you know, like a spectator in my own life in a way. But suddenly I was like experiencing things in a completely new manner. So also the time started moving slower. So I suddenly, it used to be like I could feel that a year went really fast, and then now I feel like if I look a year back, I'm like, wow, you know. And the funny thing is, I'm doing less. I'm doing less stuff, but it's like I'm experiencing a lot more. And that's, for me, that's been a complete game changer since I started actually tapping into and being honest, I guess, with what I'm feeling, right? And at least for me, most of the time, there's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Somewhere, often here, or it's very rare that I have that pain-free moment. So that's
But I think, I mean, that's the sort of what I'm aiming for. And I've aside from the one thing I've figured out, that it's my emotions are, or one way for me to feel things is place specific. So go to places that mean something to me. I've also I also try to challenge myself in these, well, more of like rule-based things. So one thing that my therapist told me a few weeks ago is that maybe your life will be more fun if you talk to strangers.
Oh, okay.
And that's an interesting thing. And I first, when he said that, my immediate response as a Swede is that, well, people will think that I'm a bit crazy if I start talking to strangers, which I think is a common response for Swedes. But then I've started to think about times when I have spoken to strangers, and that has turned out to be something quite nice. Like I went to New York I went to Washington and New York in January, and I have this it's a loose and vague bucket list of things that I want to experience. One is playing, yeah, exactly. One is playing chess at Washington Square Park in New York, or it was on my bucket list. So I went there to play chess. There are chess hustlers, they call themselves. They play for $5 a game. You can play chess with them. So I played a game with one of the chess hustlers, and then there was this New York University student also playing chess who wanted to play. He didn't charge anything. I was in New York alone. So I started playing with him for a while, and then he asked if I wanted to meet up the day after to play, and I suggested we go for breakfast. So that turned out to be a very nice experience. So I met him for a few hours the day after. We played some chess and we had breakfast. And then I've thought I feel that I need more of a rule-based system for this, so that my new rule now, and I don't follow up on it every day, but the ambition is to talk to one stranger a day. It can be for a very short period of time. And so far it hasn't, so far it's led to like one interesting meeting in the past, I think 2 or 3 weeks. But most of the time it's just, I mean, you exchange a few words with someone. You don't really, as you do. I mean, if you go out on the street now and just engage with a stranger.
But I guess it's kind of you following your intuition on who do you want to speak to, right?
Yeah.
So I guess if you go around a whole day, you have some people that you're not attracted to, and some people that you are kind of, oh, that person I feel some kind of connection with, right? So that's, I guess, a good way of but how about the people that you're interacting with in in your kind of the kind of world of political, which I guess is a very heady world, right? There's a lot of head and a lot of, and I can feel when I go back to my kind of finance world is that people are, they're like only in their heads, like not in their bodies at all. Has it changed the relationship to the people around you at work, in your work as a chief economist?
Well, maybe, I'm not sure. I've always been a quite happy and jolly person, I think. I keep on being that. But I think we talked about it just before we started recording, is a lot of my work and communication is, of course, not person to person, but in a lot of it is on Twitter, for example, where I have a different Twitter persona than I would have in person. A lot of it is through I write op-eds in the big newspapers, or I appear on debates on TV. But all of these formats they're different from personal head-to-head talk to someone, which I think is, I guess, confusing to people from the outside, because most people will just see from the outside, they see the public things.
And how is your public persona different than your private persona?
Well, the public persona is more professional, of course. I mean, it's so when I write an op-ed, then it's mostly hard facts, and these are the arguments to change this type of legislation. I mean, for example, lowering taxes on incomes. Then you have a number of arguments for that, and the counterpart will have other arguments. And they're basically the same if you appear on a public debate. So you say that you're on radio, you have 9 minutes to present your arguments. Well, then that's also, it's not much exchange of opinions. You have such a short span of time that you will just state your arguments. The other person will state their arguments, but you won't have that much of a discussion. But if you meet people outside of that arena, which is, I guess, rarer for people to, I mean, it's difficult to show that side of yourself, because I mean, I don't have a cameraman with me all the time. It's just live streaming my life. But then it's a different thing. I mean, then when you meet, like last week, I was on my way to dinner, and I passed a restaurant, and outside of the restaurant at the table were Annika Strandhäll, who was she was the minister of both social questions and environment for a while in the previous government, for the Social Democratic Party, which is not, I mean, typically if we would debate things on Twitter, it would be quite harsh.
Right.
But when I saw her, I had a T-shirt in my pocket, one of our merch from Timbro. It says "Free Love, Free Markets," and I thought I had the T-shirt with me because I was going to give it to a friend that I had dinner with. But then I thought maybe I should just go up to her and give her the T-shirt. So I did. And she had a cap saying Magda, which is Magdalena Andersson. So we exchanged merch and had.
But it's funny because it's one way. It's I guess you following your intuition, right? Something told you that this was the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, and I think that is another one of my things that I want to be more socially aggressive. I call it. Yes, I mean, approaching people, talk to strangers, say yes to everything is another motto that I have. Which I think, I mean, you never know what situation you will get in. It's a rare occasion that you regret things that you say yes to. I think that it's happened to me a few times. I said yes to I was a secretary of the governmental inquiry to get the tax on aviation, for example. That was full time for a year, and I hated every day of it. But I mean, afterwards,
doesn't sound so much fun.
No, it was super boring. But afterwards, I value that experience. So even though I hated that year of my life, work-wise, it's nice to have done it.
Absolutely. What did you actually value about it? What did you get out of it?
Well, what I got out of it is I got to see how that, because that's one of the big parts of how legislation comes about in Sweden. So now I have a greater understanding, because you can only get that far by reading about, I mean, this is how it works, but actually seeing it from the inside, you get a very theoretical perspective if you just read about how it's done from the outside. Because then, I mean, in school you'll learn that new legislation in Sweden, it starts with an inquiry, and then it goes to the parliament, and they vote about it. But seeing how pragmatic it is from the inside, and how people actually work, I mean, that's quite interesting, I think.
Good. Well, it's been. I think this has been a really interesting discussion. I think it's been interesting to see a little bit, because I realize now I don't hang around that much around atheists anymore, or I just does, and it's interesting to me to see that you can actually have spiritual experiences in a way, as an atheist as well.
No, I think all these. I mean, sure, it differs in that you believe in something or not, but I think mostly people act basically the same.
The interesting part with me is that I feel that I don't really believe in these things. It's actually some direct experience I had of the divine in a way. So for me, it's and I think maybe you have had the same experience, but you label it as something different, right?
Yeah, probably.
So,
I mean,
and I call it divine because it's the but you call it gratitude or something else, right? But we both had the same experiences, so that's quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So even though you're in this very right wing and you can right wing and atheists. You can still have spiritual experiences. So that's
exactly. I should say a lot of my colleagues are believers. So I'm I think more so at my current workplace than at any other workplace I've been. So I've worked at universities before, and I think, well, now I have more openly believing colleagues than I've had at any other workplace.
Okay. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, maybe, but interesting. Well, anyway, thanks so much for coming here and having a discussion with me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thank you.
Trevligt.
Ja, tack för att du kom hit.
Ja, tack själva.